Welcome, folks. It's so great to be with you today. I'm Star Plaxton Moore. I'm the Director of Community Engaged Learning and McCarthy Center Programs at University of San Francisco. And I'm also a member of the IRSLICE board and one of the co-chairs of the Special Programming Committee. It's an honor to co-moderate the webinar today after presenting my own dissertation in this forum last year. And I'm pleased to be in conversation with our main speaker, Dr. Mayada Kanj. This is also our first speaker who is outside of the US with an international focus, and we're really excited to have more of an international focus in the future as well. So we welcome you to encourage colleagues to apply for the DISH if they've recently completed their dissertations. I hope you're ready to absorb Dr. Kanj's wisdom, as I am. In addition to introducing myself, I also want to provide some background on this webinar series for those who may not have attended a previous session. The Dissertation DISH is a collaboration between the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement and LEAD California. Dissertation DISH webinars are meant for all audiences, from seasoned scholars to practitioners to graduate students. Dissertation DISH webinars serve to lift up and highlight some of the most recent research that has been done in the community engagement field and create a way for journal editors and conference organizers to be exposed to new research and potential presenters, and offer some support and possible guidance for those who are in graduate programs by way of providing tips for those who have just gone through the experience. So far, we've hosted 8 Dissertation DISH webinars, and we've had over 600 unique individuals attend these webinars. We're excited for you to join us today as we feature the dissertation of Dr. Mayada Kanj, lecturer at the Department of Health Promotion and Community Health and Faculty of Health Sciences at the American University of Beirut. Dr. Kanj will be discussing her dissertation topic, Partnership Experience in Service Learning between a Private University and Community Organizations in Lebanon. After the presentation, I will work with my esteemed co-moderator, Dr. Nasira Ramia, professor in the College of Social Sciences and Humanities at Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador, to facilitate a Q&A with Dr. Kanj. Finally, for those who can stick around with us past the first hour, we hope you'll join the informal conversation with Dr. Kanj for an additional 30 minutes. We also have a few logistical items before we begin the presentation. First, we encourage you to name or rename yourself, to add your institution and/or your pronouns along with your name. We also recommend that you select speaker mode in your Zoom panel. There are a few folks on this call, and so that will ensure that you're able to see the person who's speaking and who's spotlighted. Kindly keep yourself on mute during the presentation, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to post those in the chat. Nasira and I will be kind of keeping track of those so that we can bring them into the Q&A a little bit later. And then during the moderated session, Q&A session, we'll bring those in and we can have a conversation with Dr. Kanj about those. And then lastly, a reminder that we are recording this webinar and it'll be available within a few days on LEAD California's YouTube channel. We'll send out a link once it's available. And with that, I welcome my co-moderator, Dr. Nasira Ramia, to introduce herself and our Dissertation DISH speaker.
Thank you, Star. My name is Nasira Ramia. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. I am a professor of education in Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador, and I am also a member of the IRSLICE board. I also direct in my institution big community project that is geared towards STEAM education for teachers and students. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mayada Kanj. She's a lecturer at the Department of Health Promotion and Community Health, Faculty of Health Sciences at the American University of Beirut. Until 2015, Mayada coordinated the Health Education Resource Unit at FHS. This entailed managing local and regional projects with UN partners like WHO, UNICEF, UNESCO, as well as international collaborations with Center for Communication Programs at Johns Hopkins University and Kansas University Online Community Toolbox. In her current post, she teaches and supervises graduate and undergraduate students enrolled in the Masters of Public Health and Health Communication programs. She's a member of the Service Learning Task Force, which in 2012 introduced the service learning pedagogy to FHS. She taught several service learning courses and was able to experience firsthand the engagement of community organizations with academia. She is currently a member of the Community Engagement Task Force, supervising the Community Engagement General Education requirement for undergraduate students. Her research interests are health literacy, community-university partnerships, and health communication. Mayada has a master's in public health, a concentration in health behavior and education from AUB, and she received a Doctor of Education from the School of Histories, Languages and Cultures, University of Liverpool, UK in 2022. So we are ready for you, Mayada. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasira. So I guess I'll share the screen. Oh. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today and present some highlights from my dissertation. Now, my research topic was partnership experience in service learning between a private university and community organizations. So in this thesis, I explored the experience of these community organizations, which are located in the vicinity of the university, in the service learning relationship they engaged in since 2012, which was the time when the faculty adopted service learning as a pedagogy in its courses. My research question was to explore how community-university partnerships are created and sustained in a service learning experience in a public health context in Lebanon. I was interested in exploring the motives of organizations. Why do they engage in this relationship? How is the relationship managed? And how is power enacted in this relationship? Now, this research responds to a gap in the literature by exploring the service learning experience from the perspective of community partners in a non-Western context in the Middle East. Actually, there is barely any literature done in the region on any aspect of service learning, and I realized this when I was working on my thesis. Now, lately, public health programs have been increasingly adopting experiential pedagogies to impact surrounding communities, promote civic awareness, and offer hands-on learning experiences for students. Now, in a public health context, it's critical to ensure partnerships are maintained and positively impact communities where they take place. As such, the aim of the service learning partnership is not limited to achieving student learning outcomes. A social justice agenda that addresses structural inequities must also be embraced. What happens is that power inequities present challenges to the creation of reciprocal partnerships, and in the absence of reciprocity, mutual benefit is compromised. So understanding the nature of the relationship, how it has evolved, will impact the service learning outcomes. I chose partnerships as a unit of analysis for my research. Now, partnerships are one venue to study effectiveness of the service learning experience. Community campus partnerships for health defined a partnership as a mutual collaboration among parties sharing common interests, privileges, and power. Now, in the context of this research, a partnership is the relationship created in service learning between the faculty, which is the academic partner, the community organization, which hosts students registered in service learning courses. It entails all the ongoing interactions between the faculty member, the focal point at the organization, the exchange of benefits, as well as the power dynamic within which the interaction has been taking place. So I will follow the following outline for my presentation. I will give a bit of background about the context, the countries, the university, and the community organizations. I'll describe the conceptual framework and the methodology I adopted, and then I'll be sharing my findings, maybe some main themes related to motivation to engage in the relationship, reciprocity and the relational exchange within the partnership, power dynamics in the partnership. And I will share some, briefly, some practical applications and implications resulting from this research. Now, Lebanon is a developing country in the Middle East, a region of continuous unrest. And Lebanon is actually this tiny place here. You can barely see it. It's around 4,000 square miles or 10,000 kilometers. It's really a very tiny country. However, it has experienced since 1975 several internal and external political unrest, displacement, economic crises, and downfall, all of which pushed vulnerable communities into poverty and led to internal displacement. Now, these community organizations that we have been collaborating with are the sites where students are placed. These vary in nature. Some are linked to a government entity, others are non-government organizations that work independently or are affiliated with an international body. These organizations provide services to local residents, such as free clinics, after-school activities, health awareness sessions. Now, the number of civil society organizations in Lebanon increased largely between 1958 and 1964, when they were recognized by the state. And in the post-1975 war, they played a highly active role and grew to become main service providers in the absence of any public services offered by the state. Now, the American University of Beirut was established in 1866 by American missionaries. And since its establishment, AUB has engaged in community service to address needs triggered by wars and political unrest in the country. In 2008, the Center for Civic Engagement was created to connect the AUB community with policymakers and humanitarian agencies to facilitate access to marginalized communities. Now, to achieve this, various initiatives were led to connect the university to its community, such as promoting volunteerism in community projects, as well as incorporating a service learning pedagogy in teaching in the university. Now, these changes were opportune for the Faculty of Health Sciences, where I'm based and where I conducted this research. Thus, in line with the university initiatives and responsiveness to national and regional needs, the faculty opted to incorporate service learning as a pedagogy starting in 2012. And here you can see some slides. It's a beautiful campus, actually. It's a lot of greenery, and it's like a green oasis in the middle of, a very turbulent city. Now, the conceptual framework I use is grounded in conceptions of engagement, which is reflexive, participatory, and democratic. Now, this democratic culture is one that is inclusive, collaborative, and reciprocal, where engagement is about process and purpose and is not an end in itself. Democratic engagement has implications on modifying higher education so that its leadership and administration are guided by democratic values. I will refer also to Freire to discuss awareness of power structures and willingness to engage in the dialogue to understand power relations. Now, using these conceptions, the following aspects were used to define the framework: an emphasis on building reciprocal partnerships, addressing power inequities, and creating partnerships to bring about social change. Now, these aspects constitute components of the critical service learning model by Mitchell, 2008. This model assumes mutual benefit is a shared value. It places engagement within a social justice framework and seeks to deconstruct systems of power. So with its focus on mutual benefit, creating social change, and redistribution of power, it embraced values that the faculty was trying to uphold in adopting a service learning pedagogy. Now, I adopted a qualitative research methodology, purposeful sampling, and as to the selection criteria, I used duration of the partnership and affiliation of the organization. Now, since introducing service learning in 2012, the number of partnering organizations has increased to 30, and this number differs every semester, depending on the service course learning courses being offered and the readiness of the organizations to host students at any specific time. The type and affiliation of the organizations also vary. For example, out of the 10 local NGOs, 2 were connected to international counterparts, 3 were government-affiliated hospitals, 4 were centers associated with state or municipalities. Now, the duration of the partnership also varies among these organizations. Some had collaborated only once, while others have been engaging every single semester since 2012. Now, I conducted semi-structured interviews with all 16 community organizations and all the 6 faculty who taught service learning since its inception. The interviews were done in Arabic, so I had to resort to translation and back translation. And then, of course, I used focus group discussions for validations of the themes that were constructed. In the coming slides, I'll be discussing some of the main themes that were constructed from this research. So the first theme was motives. Now, community organizations and higher education institutes represent different cultures and contexts. Thus, it would be expected that their motives to engage in a relationship would differ. Now, these differences impacted the extent to which each side was willing to invest in the relationship and the interpretation each side gave regarding the ongoing interactions. For faculty, motives were centered around achieving learning outcomes for students. For the organizations, besides access to technical resources and expertise of faculty, it was a value placed on opportunities created by collaborating with an academic entity. Through the collaboration, organizations were able to form personal connections within an otherwise closed structure. These connections presented assets and resources for future collaboration. The fact that motives of faculty were restricted to achieving student learning outcomes impacted the process of engagement, pushing it towards a charity model away from democratic engagement. When service learning is the outcome, the motives and expectations of partners became restricted to tangible benefits, where the focus was on the engagement as an outcome. And here I will read some code, interesting code. When patients and staff say we are hosting students from AUB, this is very important for us. Irrespective of single experiences, there is important benefit, otherwise we wouldn't enter this relationship. It's to our advantage to work with AUB at all levels. Later, when our organization needs AUB, the university, the relationship between the focal points will be there. Another set of motives were related to reputation, but I will discuss this in the coming slide. Sorry. So besides access to resources and collaboration opportunities, reputation of the university was another category of motives. AUB has had significant impact on higher education in Lebanon and the Middle East, and there was an expectation among organizations to benefit from this reputation. The reputation of the university gave visibility to the organization, as well as an opportunity to gain credibility in their own context among their staff and their community members. This gave them power and legitimacy in their context. Now, with these motives for the two partners, engagement became limited in that it emphasized the dominant culture of the academic partner. And I'll read here again a quote: just by saying that a university like AUB and a municipality like us are together gives this collaboration its weight. When patients and staff see that we are hosting public health students from AUB, this is something very important for us. Another theme was reciprocity and relational exchange. Now, community respondents described attributes of the relationship impacting the relational exchange. They were satisfied with interpersonal relations with individual faculty, but critical of conditions of the relationship and engagement structures. Interruptions in the relationship impacted engagement and the extent of benefit from the collaboration. Difference in timing and differing expectations of deliverables within those timelines impacted the extent to which the needs of the institutions are being addressed. In a collectivist context, physical presence indicates respect and value to the community. So when faculty were absent, this led to frustration and disappointment. When community organizations enter a partnership with the university, they are taking risks in terms of their time spent to supervise students, funds reallocation, and so on. These risks are amplified when the reputation of the organization is at stake, when commitments by the academic partner are not kept. The limited engagement was perceived as an abuse of power by the academic partner. And here we read, someone was supposed to come, it was never happening, not even once. I care about having a long-term relationship. This is important for us. We are benefiting, but we need something long-term. Another factor was engagement structures, exclusion, which I will discuss in the next slides. Compared to community organizations, universities present a highly structured context, which presents barriers as to where and how the organization can enter the structure to initiate a process of collaboration. The organizational structure of the university resulted in a form of power that weakened the possibility of a partnership. The interruptions, limited engagement, didn't allow space and continuity to build a trusting relationship. Assessment tools used did not inquire about dynamics of engagement, which could have brought power issues to the forefront. This led to further feelings of exclusion as community respondents were denied space to provide feedback and express needs. Yet, organizations were hopeful that with time, the relationship with academia will become more reciprocal. Given the value they placed on connecting with the faculty, they accepted the status quo, demanding change risks the ongoing relationship, and they were unwilling to take that risk. Absence of formal agreement, insufficient interaction and engagement, lack of continuity were reasons for community respondents not to consider a relationship a partnership, but a form of collaboration. Community respondents did not feel faculty were investing as an equal partner and felt excluded in the relationship. Faculty, on the other hand, seemed satisfied with this system, as it ensured a venue for students to conduct course activities. They did not question whether this system is able to create a reciprocal relationship, which would then necessitate creating different mechanisms for engagement. They perceived their identity as a server in a relationship with set specific activities. So the way the service-learning relationship was created and maintained did not allow for building a reciprocal relationship that can empower organizations. And despite the long duration of some collaborations, like 9 semesters, community respondents did not perceive the engagement as balanced. There were no clear pathways for engagement. Existing or structures created obstacles to forming a reciprocal relationship. And here's some quotes to illustrate frustration. I don't want to be harsh. This is not a partnership. And in partnership, a lot of give and exchange. This is not happening. Both sides should feel they belong. I haven't had this feeling yet. Another theme which was constructed was power. Now, the critical service learning model seeks to deconstruct systems of power in the service learning partnership. And the first step in this process was to explore how power is described by the partners engaged in the relationship. Community organizations struggled with that question. They paused, they laughed, they were surprised, they felt uneasy about it. They defined power. Power was defined as a state, having expertise, reputation, able to decide freely, It was also defined as power within, or one party trying to dominate the other, or power over, somebody who has control. Now, all of these definitions were narrow and did not capture complexities of social interactions where power came into play. And here we can see how they reacted. The question is difficult. This is the first time I think about these matters openly. It's a collaboration. Power is not a factor. We never thought of who has power. We never think this way. We are an association. We help people. We care to be in a good relationship with faculty and to benefit. Now, both partners rejected the idea that the partnership was a power relationship. Organizations expressed awareness of the privileged power the university has, but did not consider that as a factor impacting interactions. Community respondents were able to easily refer to and describe interactions with faculty members, but were unable to reflect on or describe how the occurring interactions were reflecting an underlying power dynamic. Their narrow definition of power impacted their perception of the ongoing interactions. Organizations minimized the significance of power issues and distanced themselves, their NGO, from this discussion. Now, this was not surprising, as people usually are unaware of how power is affecting interactions. So they end up preferring not to question what is happening, but describe actions without relating these actions to how power is being enacted. And here we read, there is no power here. They send whom they want. They are taking what they want from the relationship, but there is no power in this relationship. Faculty accepted the imbalance in the relationship. They were aware that organizations gain visibility from this relationship. However, they perceived their power being used to influence and to mentor and not to play the upper hand or coerce. However, having no intention of coercing does not exclude other forms of power being enacted. Those who are privileged and possess power may not be conscious of this power or have the intention to oppress others, just as those in the weaker position may not be aware of the realities of being suppressed, beyond a feeling of frustration or blaming the self for not doing a better job. Interpersonal relations offered opportunities for collaboration while simultaneously maintaining a system of inequality in the way they were being structured. Now, this explains why organizations express satisfaction with personal connections despite the relationship being inequitable. It also explains how community organizations perceive the ability to freely decide to remain in the relationship, an indication of equal power among partners. Now, reaction to academia power was one sub-theme under power. Organizations accepted the elitist position of the university and firmly believed that academia is difficult to change. They tried to make sense of the conditions in place as change was beyond their control, noting that it was expected for organizations to accommodate academia. Management, even at several organizations, insisted on maintaining a relationship with AUB, in particular the faculty, despite the extra burden on staff and the lack of clear benefit from hosting students in service learning partnerships. Community respondents reported even being given directives to maintain the relationship and not to risk it in any way. Now, such a directive could have created pressure on the staff to accept conditions as set by the academic partner. And here I read, they told me from the beginning, students can only do this. I accommodated their need. It's normal. I used to wish students could work on something, on another task, as this is more of a need for us. Now I set my priorities with those of the faculty, propose for the students. I'm not dealing with another NGO. I'm dealing with an academic institution. It is normal, acceptable. They set their standards. I consider it the duty of the NGO to accept this because we are working with a university. Now, by normalizing the situation, it was clear that organizations did not want to risk disrupting the relationship, but chose to accommodate requests and conditions set by the academic partner. They felt a reputable university would have access to other organizations, and this made them doubt their value as a site to the academic partner. As such, community organizations expressed willingness to accept the status quo of the partnership while maintaining attempts to try to benefit more. Their unwillingness to act independently, bringing up the issue of rights and doubt of what is allowed in the relationship, reflects a power dynamic and lack of clarity about each party's role in the relationship, which is why many requested a formal agreement with the university. The formal agreement was perceived as one form of structure that can ensure a more equitable relationship. Now, these findings are in line with what Freire predicted, that when the context does not allow an open, trusting dialogue to take place, feelings of powerlessness and acceptance of the status quo can be expected. And here we read, I tell them these things with suggestions, feedback over the phone. They never told me to send them my feedback by email. Maybe they should have asked me to be more formal. No, we never asked again because I felt they know what they have to do. Now, to understand the power interplay, we must consider the context, the culture in which the relationship occurs. It was not surprising for organizations to feel uncomfortable discussing power issues. In a collectivist context, social harmony is favored, making it highly unlikely that an organization would question practices of the university. Power differences are accepted, appreciated, and in most cases cannot be disrupted. Thus, an open discussion of power issues with a powerful entity will not happen naturally and needs to be planned as part of the partnership building process. Being situated in a collectivist culture seemed to impact the acceptance of unequal relationships. Power as a theme was interwoven throughout all discussions in this research. With an open discussion of power issues, organizations became cognizant of potential opportunities to benefit from the partnership. They also became conscious of the power imbalance in the relationship, yet there was no intention of disrupting this balance. So, some practical implications and applications when the collaboration is uniting actors with different agendas and power differential. So despite the good intentions, the difference in power will lead to differential outcomes. Unless attention is given to the existing power hierarchy, the group with more power will dominate. Becoming aware of power differentials is a first step in dismantling the power hierarchy. When academic professionals and community representatives are unable to effectively map reciprocity and power within a partnership, their ability to manage power inequalities is compromised. In the social and cultural context of this research, an American higher education institute is a powerful and credible entity. And because of the cultural context and existing norms regarding power relationships, the faculty must be proactive and take the lead in initiating discussions around power dynamics and reciprocal partnerships. Introducing culture into the framework allowed interpretation and understanding of the perception of power among partners, which will have implications on how power will be discussed and partnerships created and sustained in similar contexts of service learning relationship. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mayada. That was a wonderful overview of your dissertation. I have so many thoughts to share. And so I'll just reflect a few things that were coming up for me and invite Nasira to do the same. First, I just want to appreciate that you were able to create a space for community partners to really share with honesty, even if they weren't originally attending to this notion of power imbalances, the fact that they could honestly share things like, I loved the quote, both sides should feel they belong. And I have not felt this yet. Like that's such a powerful statement in terms of just giving a sense of how community partners are situated. And I think, you know, a lot of what you shared is reflected in kind of US-based research on community partnerships too, although I love that you sort of had this lens on, you know, in a collectivist context, how is it even more, you know, prevalent for community partners to just sort of go along to get along and just kind of continue with the status quo. And I almost see your research project as a form of consciousness raising, you know, by bringing folks in and asking them these questions. Hopefully you were sort of planting seeds with people that they should start kind of interrogating those power dynamics and maybe asserting more of what they need and what they want. And so I hope this is, you know, that this process really led to a little bit of like empowerment for the community partners. And then the other thing that came to mind for me, and I'd love to ask you a question later about this, is, you know, how to better prepare faculty or orient faculty toward being in right relationship or being in equitable relationship with community partners. So those are the things that are percolating with me. Nasira, I'd love for you to just share your initial comments as well.
Yes, thank you so much. I felt very identified with the context, even though it is all the way in the other side of the world. I think that what you say of a collectivist culture resonated with my context in Latin America. I think that also I think that your research brought some awareness of these issues of power, and they were as if something that was the equitable relationship was not expected in the culture, and also the very privileged position of the university. All these issues come into play in these contexts, and of course, yeah, as the same as Star, how do we set up programs? How do we become more conscious of these things? Because if you did say that the faculty accepted this imbalance, but not necessarily thinking that, you know, they were kind of unaware of their position or of the damage that these non-partnerships or these inequitable relationships that they were creating. So it's kind of like expected status quo, as you said, type of business, doing the business as usual. And when you have, as I understood in your university, these programs that are a part of like a general curriculum, these ongoing programs, then this happens ongoing for years and years and years. So I really think that you brought to light something that's probably happening in many other places around the world. And I think that you, with your research, you created the awareness in these people and in others who are reading it. I'm also interested in you discussing a little bit more this part that you said that you should bring culture into the analysis. I think that's very rich. And also, I had a question about just those very small question about the methodology, about the number of participants. I don't know if I didn't catch that, or so I don't know how many people were participating in this research. And we do have more questions in the chat, so we will be starting with those soon. Yeah.
Okay. Now you mentioned many questions, so I'll just start with the last one because I can still remember the last one. So in terms of the number of participants, actually we had I interviewed all the collaborating agencies now who were still collaborating with us, which ended up being 16, all of them. So, and I also interviewed all the faculty, which were 6, who were teaching service learning pedagogy in their classes. Now, service learning was not obligatory in our courses, it was option. So only those who were motivated, who were interested, did adopt it as in their classrooms, because it was, anyway, it's not an easy pedagogy to adopt. It requires lots of effort from us as faculty. So not many were keen on that. But I did talk to all the 6 who have been teaching since it's 2012, all faculty and all organizations who were, in the relationship. What were the other questions? Sorry, I forgot those.
Yeah, Star, you can restate yours.
Yeah, actually, maybe just related to what you were just talking about, Mayada, there's a question from Elaine Ikeda about your methodology. And if you could talk a little bit about what purposeful sampling is and what that looked like in your study.
So basically, I wanted to adopt basically, to choose organizations based on a set criteria for my selection, which is duration of participation and the type of the organization. The type being making sure that I, include different categories of organizations, those which are public, linked to a government entity only, those which are linked to international organization, and those which are private NGOs, because the management would differ and the expectations would differ in each of those. Or I thought that, So that, making sure that all of these factors, which could lead to differences in my interviews, were taken into consideration in my selection of the organization. And with the faculty, I just spoke to everyone, so it wasn't really purposeful. It was just like everybody who was teaching a service learning pedagogy.
That's great. So we have also kind of a question from Rochelle, and I want to maybe kind of tag on to that question. So Rochelle asks, what do you think the role of service learning and community engagement practitioners is in mediating the relationship dynamic between faculty and community partners? So folks like me who are at the Public Service Center or Civic Engagement Center who are trying to kind of connect faculty and community partners. Is there a role that we can play? And then I guess maybe like the second question, which is what I was referring to before, is like how can faculty kind of, what sort of faculty development might be appropriate or necessary?
Now, faculty were really unaware that what they were doing was really leading to any inequitable relationship, because they had their own definition of what equity is in a relationship. Because again, definition of power that all partners, the faculty and organizations had, was a very narrow definition. It did not capture the interactions with what was happening in that interaction. So they missed. So they did not, for example, see that having being the one to decide on dates, being the one to decide when students can go or not go, is really a power dynamic in the relationship. They were unable to connect these things together, both faculty and organizations. So I think an important starting point would be to really make both parties aware of this definition that is broad and that can capture all the dynamic in the relationship. Because otherwise you'll be limited to this narrow definition and you will not be able to capture the inequities which are resulting in the relationship. Now, if I can, what can the role be? Now, I think, faculty need to be oriented and need to be, the definition of a partnership has to be, they may not know what it means to be in a partnership, because again, seeing things or we mentor or we advise without really coercing, but again, they were leading the organization indirectly to act in certain ways. So that is really an abuse of their power, but they were not doing it consciously. They were unaware of this. So it's not like they were an evil entity. They just did not know. So I think our role would be to make sure that these definitions are clear, and the dynamics and the definition of power is clear to all parties, to both partners. So then they can be in a better place to really monitor and map these power differences, and they will resist. Faculty will not be very open to this. Nobody wants to give up power they have. So, if faculty would need to know how can they really share their power with the organization, and how can they do that? Maybe inviting organizations to come over. Will they be willing to do this? I don't know to what extent that they will be open to that. Some may not. So, making sure that definitions of a partnership is clear, power relationships are clear, being proactive in opening these discussions, because the organization will not bring this up. They were very happy and content just to have a connection, okay? And they, although they were feeling intimidated in the relationship, but they did not want to disrupt it in any way. Yet, faculty, so because the situation is like this, faculty must be proactive about this. And they need to be the ones to lead this engagement, this discussion, and bring these issues to the open, and maybe encourage or create safe spaces and trust with the partners, so the partners will be ready and willing to open up and express, their needs and expectations from this relationship. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much. Nasira, do you have any other questions that you want to pose in this format, or otherwise, since we're kind of an intimate group, we could also just move right into kind of more of an open conversation?
No, I think we can definitely move into an open conversation. I think that one general question that is always, I think, the objective of this forum is, how do you think you would give advice, or what do you think your research and your experience in your research has made you think about advice you can have for prospective or current graduate students?
Well, I mean, I bring up power issues more often in my classes now. I make them aware to this, these delicate connections between partners. So power is now more present in my classes and the discussion. Even now, like I said, I'm working we are working in the university on creating a community engagement course for all university students. So I'm in charge of writing the section on, the partnership and the power dynamic, and, how that can be, so students become sensitized to the power they have when they enter a community, and to be respectful of what the community has, and ensure that any action they do, it's in the back of their head, that it is really that they are creating the space for the partner to be present, to be open, and to create a trusted relationship with their community organization. So, I mean, I think the impact of my research is that this is really now more present in all my teaching, and all the activities I'm engaged in at the university.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually really appreciate too that notion of, I mean, how does it change our own practice when we move through these research projects, right? And what are the things, hopefully we're shaping the field, but I love that idea of like, how is it changing the way we're showing up and the way we're doing community engaged learning, and this notion of making power more visible and central in your teaching, I think really resonates with me too, right? Because otherwise it just continues to sort of be unseen or uninterrogated by different folks. So I imagine, what you're doing is just creating a really positive ripple effect in terms of setting a foundation for greater equity in those partnerships.
Yeah, it's not easy, and I was even surprised with the results that I got. I didn't expect it to be the case. I went to the field, because I had a guess that this was happening, but I thought that organizations would be very vocal to express their anger, their dissatisfaction. And I was shocked to see that nobody did that. Everybody was satisfied. No, we're okay, So to me, this was, and I belong to this culture, and to me, this was really a very big surprise. I didn't expect this at all to happen. And it was a learning experience for me as well to see that, wow, I mean, they don't want to disrupt this hierarchy. And so what do we need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen? Because so we don't end up abusing our partners, in the relationship. So I mean, this was a learning experience as well, because like I said, I wasn't aware, I didn't expect this to be the case, actually.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared what surprised you.
Yeah.
Given that we have this nice intimate group, I wonder if we just want to move into more of a conversation. And I feel like what you just shared was so juicy too, in terms of, partners kind of not expressing anger, not really like expressing a strong desire to disrupt. And I don't know if we want to stick with that conversation and other participants want to weigh in. I see Cami and Rochelle and Elaine with us. But maybe we can actually stop the recording now, which is what we traditionally do at the end of the the Q&A part of the session and just have more of an open conversation about any themes that have bubbled up.